low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jean, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, June 7th, 2026 issue of the Viewpoints section of Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. America at 250. Nation is drifting from its ideals as unchecked power corrupts, by Carolyn Good. As the nation approaches its 250th anniversary, Americans should be entering a moment of pride, reckoning, and aspiration, honoring our founding ideals, confronting our injustices, and committing to a shared, inclusive future. But millions cannot reach that place. They're living in a country where the most basic democratic promise, that no one, not even the president, is above the law, is no longer true. And they're asking a question no democracy should ever force its people to ask. How do you confront injustice when leaders erase the history, hide the evidence, excuse the wrongdoing, and protect the perpetrators? People are watching January 6 perpetrators not only be pardoned, but now discussed as victims deserving compensation, while others who committed far lesser offenses remain in prison. They're watching families who lost loved ones, officers who were attacked, and judges who were threatened receive no acknowledgement, while those who carried out the violence are elevated. They're watching Jeffrey Epstein victims still seeking closure, while Ghislaine Maxwell lives comfortably. And they're watching Congress and the courts fail to check a president who intimidates, retaliates, enriches himself, and bends institutions to serve him. This is not a moment of national pride. It's a moment of national disorientation. People are trying to live their lives, raise their families, and hold on to hope while watching the guardrails of democracy bend in plain sight. They see a president who rewards loyalty over law, who uses public office for personal gain, who threatens opponents, and who treats institutions as tools for retribution. They see leaders in Congress who enable it, courts that hesitate to confront it, and a political culture that shrugs at behavior that would once have ended careers. Selective accountability, truth rewritten, history sanitized, wrongdoing reframed as patriotism, victims forgotten, perpetrators elevated. This is the opposite of the ideals the nation claims to honor. Power corrupts not only through threats and retaliation, but through a steady misuse of public authority for personal benefit. In this administration, corruption is carried out in public view. Foreign payments and business entanglements that raise emoluments, concerns, political loyalty rewarded with pardons, critics targeted with state power, and federal agencies pressured to serve the interests of one individual rather than the nation. People are not confused about what they are seeing. They're not watching public power used not to uphold the law, but to protect the powerful, a reversal of the very purpose of democratic institutions. They're watching a president openly threaten political opponents, promise retribution, and use language of vengeance. They're watching members of Congress echo those threats, minimize violence, and elevate individuals who attack their workplace. They're watching courts delay rulings, narrow accountability, or confronting the full scope of wrongdoing. They're watching institutions that once stood as guardrails now bend under pressure. This is not the America people were taught to believe in. It's not the America they want to pass on to their children, and it's not the America that deserves a 250th anniversary celebration. That is why this anniversary demands more than celebration. It demands clarity. Anniversaries have always forced nations to confront both their ideals and their failures. Every major milestone in American history has required a reckoning with the gap between the promise and practice, and this one is no different. America's ideals, liberty, equality, self-government, the rule of law, the protection of rights, and the consent of the governed, has always defined who we claim to be. Yet those ideals are drifting out of reach. The semi-quincentennial is supposed to be a moment of reflection, a chance to embrace those ideals, honor where we've been, measure where we are going, and imagine where we are going. But reflection requires honesty. It requires confronting the truth, not burying it. It requires acknowledging harm, not excusing it. It requires accountability, not avoidance. These ideals are being reversed. When power goes unchecked, the burden always falls on ordinary people. Millions of Americans are not refusing to celebrate out of cynicism. They are refusing to celebrate without accountability is not patriotism, it's denial. They understand that a nation cannot move forward if it refuses to confront what has become. They understand that justice cannot function when a power shields itself from consequence. And they understand something else. A country that cannot tell the truth about its past or its present cannot shape a just future. Fractures like this do not heal on their own. They require action from all of us. To keep the nation from drifting further from its ideals, every part of American democracy must reclaim its role. The people must demand transparency, reject narratives that excuse wrongdoing, and stay engaged beyond election cycles. Congress must reassert its oversight powers, enforce subpoenas, strengthen ethics laws, and restore the checks and balances the framers designed. The courts must apply the law consistently and protect judicial independence, ensuring that no one, not even a president, is above the law. Institutions must resist political pressure, protect whistleblowers, and uphold the principle that public office is a public trust. And the nation as a whole must confront the truth, reinforce civic education, and treat accountability not as a political weapon, but as a constitutional obligation. And the presidency itself must return to the oath it demands, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. That oath is not symbolic. It is the legal boundary that restrains executive power. A president must respect the guardrails that prevent corruption, the separation of powers, the independence of the Justice Department, the prohibition against using public office for private gain, and the expectation that truth, not loyalty, guides public service. As America approaches this milestone, the question is not whether people should celebrate. The question is whether the nation's leaders will honor the principles they are sworn to uphold, whether they will restore the promise that has now been broken, whether they will show the courage to confront wrongdoing even when it comes from within their own ranks, whether they will choose the Constitution over convenience, the rule of law over loyalty, and the country over themselves. And until accountability returns, not as a slogan but as a constitutional obligation, millions of Americans will remain unable to celebrate a nation that refuses to confront what has become or honor the future it still claims to promise. Agreement is not the same as understanding, by Randy McCrae. During a recent conversation, my 16-year-old son told me that I didn't understand him. Parents know these moments well. What begins as a disagreement about something practical can quickly become something larger. A conversation about rules, expectations, timing, priorities, or responsibilities suddenly transforms into a referendum on whether your child feels seen, heard, and respected. At first, I responded the way many parents do, by focusing on the issue at hand. But as we continued talking, I realized something more important was happening beneath the surface. When my son said I did not understand him, what he often meant was that I did not agree with him. That distinction matters more than we may realize. We often confuse understanding with endorsement. If someone does not validate our conclusion, mirror our emotions, or support our position, we assume they've failed to hear us. We interpret disagreement as dismissal. But understanding and agreement are not the same. Understanding asks whether I can grasp how you arrived at your perspective. Agreement asks whether I share it. One is rooted in empathy and curiosity. The other is rooted in alignment. A person can fully understand your frustration and still think you're wrong. A spouse can understand your feelings and still see the situation differently. A parent can understand why a teenager wants more freedom and still say no. Somewhere along the way, many of us learn to collapse these differences into one demand. If you love me, respect me, or care about me, you will agree with me. I know this because I once believed it too. As I reflected on that conversation with my son, I realized I grew up carrying a similar assumption. Agreement felt like validation. Disagreement felt like rejection. Many people never outgrow that framework. They simply carry it into adulthood and apply it to marriages, friendships, workplace, and civic life. You can see it everywhere. National data suggests many Americans feel the same strain. 8 in 10 U.S. adults say Republican and Democratic voters cannot agree on basic facts about important issues. A record 45% of Americans now identify as politically independent, and 85% say politically motivated violence is increasing. These numbers point to more than policy disagreement. They reflect a country struggling to stay in a relationship across differences. When agreement becomes the price of being understood, curiosity disappears. Conversations become negotiations for emotional validation rather than opportunities for learning. People stop asking questions and start defending positions. Every difference feels personal, and perhaps most damaging of all, we become fragile in the face of ordinary disagreement. That fragility shows up in homes as much as it does in the headlines. As a parent, I could have ended the conversation the old-fashioned way. I could have pulled rank, asserted authority, or dismissed his frustration with some version of, "because I said so." But I wanted something different for my son. I wanted him to understand that someone you can hear you deeply and still not side with you. That being challenged is not the same as being devalued. That emotional maturity includes tolerating the discomfort of not getting consensus. Most of all, I wanted to model that difficult conversations can still be kind. This is not just a parenting lesson, it's a civic one. A pluralistic society depends on people who can remain in relationships despite disagreement. If every disagreement is interpreted as disrespect, then only echo chambers feel safe. We do not need less conviction. We need stronger relational skills. We need the capacity to hold our values without requiring universal affirmation. We need to listen for meaning instead of only listening for compliance. My son may not have realized it, but he gave me a useful reminder. Being understood feels good. Being agreed with feels good too. But they're different experiences, and confusing them can damage relations we care about the most. One of the most important lessons we can teach our children and ourselves is that disagreement is not abandonment. Someone can love you, hear you, respect you, and still see things differently. In an age where so many conversations collapse under the weight of all that confusion, learning the difference may be one of the most necessary skills we have left. Youth mental health system is broken. Another voice by Joe Summers. My youngest son spent his 12th birthday in a psychiatric emergency room. He sat in limbo at Strong Memorial Hospital after his suicide attempt. He was cleared for discharge, but remained there while adults and service providers argued over what to do with him. Child Protective Services recommended one plan, the hospital another. Everyone was talking past each other. He is not alone. More than 200 children each year endure prolonged hospital stays after they're cleared for discharge. No child should live this way. We cannot accept a system where everyone agrees a child needs help, but nobody actually makes it happen. My son has struggled with ADHD, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts since preschool. I've watched him battle emotional outbursts, panic, and destructive behavior. I've spent years trying to get him help, everything from therapists to crisis teams. In 2023, after a crisis at school, he was taken by ambulance to Strong. He was discharged within a day with instructions to follow up with outpatient care. That became a pattern. Every crisis led us back to the hospital. Every discharge sent us home with safety plans and referrals, but not the community-based support he needed. Then earlier this month, I woke up to find him severely disoriented after an apparent suicide attempt. I rushed him to the hospital where he was admitted to inpatient psychiatric care for the first time. I hoped this would finally lead to meaningful treatment. But he was discharged again, and shortly thereafter, another crisis erupted. Back to the hospital. Within a day, I was told he was ready to go home. I said no, because without intensive support, we'd be right back where we started. The hospital determined he could be discharged. The professionals who know him best, his therapist, school clinicians, and advocates, believed he needed a higher level of care. Nobody agreed on the next steps. This is what hospital boarding looks like. New York can do better. I was happy to see the state legislators in both chambers pass a bill empowering the Council on Children and Families to intervene when agencies stall. But the agency still needs greater resources and staff to actually get kids care. So we have more work to do, because right now, my son is still waiting. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The Plattners are in therapy, and it's clear they need it, by Froma Harrop. The Democrats' apparent choice to replace Maine Republican Susan Collins in the U.S. Senate has built a rap sheet of dazzling disqualifiers. It wasn't enough that Graham Plattner's impersonation of a blue-collar oysterman has been exposed. Turns out he attended the Hotchkiss School, an elite prep school in Connecticut, and is grandson of Warren Plattner, the celebrated modernist architect. He's equally unconvincing in explaining away his easily identifiable Nazi tattoo. But the crowning detail in his bizarre persona was a creepy penchant for texting sexually explicit messages with multiple women. Just listen to his wife, Amy Gertner, who was dragged out in public to make a cringy video defending Graham's raunchy activities. "We've got 2 dogs and we love each other deeply," she says. "Also, being married is hard, and going through infertility is hard." What's that to voters? They only see a thoroughly depressed, defeated, and pathetic woman. And to think the Plattners haven't been married even 3 years. Trying to ease the public's concerns that a couple is troubled, Amy notes that everyone is in therapy. I don't even know if I have the right words to describe what we've been going through," she says. "But our marriage counselor helps, and we work on our mental health every day." "All those mean articles about their marriage," she adds, "are just extra, well, you know." Graham backed Amy on the counseling front. "Amy and I went through something hard because of me. We did the work." Amy remains angered by the release of information about Graham's sexting activities. "I confided deeply personal details about my marriage to someone I considered a friend," she said. Well, save that for Ann Landers. Graham has unrelated Reddit posts to explain. He wrote in 2019 that a fellow Marine wounded in Afghanistan, later identified as Ted Daniels, didn't deserve to live. He survived only thanks to poor marksmanship by the Taliban. Daniels had received a Purple Heart. Graham says he posted awful things after he himself served as a Marine in Iraq and Afghanistan. He said he suffered from PTSD, for which he is also getting treatment. He posted on Reddit under the name of P. Hustle. In response to another user's "cops are bastards" comment, Graham wrote, "All of them, in fact." Graham now owns an oyster company and runs a mooring and dive service while earning benefits as a 100% disabled veteran. When his political director, Genevieve McDonald, resigned, Graham offered her $15,000 in severance pay if she signed a non-disclosure agreement promising not to reveal sensitive information. His campaign manager also jumped ship, as did his campaign finance director. With almost no information about the guy, Bernie Sanders led the left fringe munchkins into pouring support for the colorfully radical but clearly unvetted candidate. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren called Plattner the real deal. His main primary opponent, Janet Mills, dropped out of the race for lack of money. And what were her qualifications to represent Maine and Washington? She's only the governor. Maine is a swingy state, and antipathy towards Donald Trump has dimmed Collins' prospects for winning another Senate term. Many see flipping that seat as essential to giving Democrats a Senate majority. But now the choice for Maine voters is the moderate Collins or the clearly unstable Plattner. We can only wish the Plattners success in their marriage and other counseling, but what's that got to do with Maine? The Plattners are in therapy. Democrats who jumped on their float need it too. Moving on. As competitions end, 43 North must find new ways to help startups thrive. Editorial. The excitement will be missed, but the work will continue. When 43 North announced that its last startup competition will take place this October, disappointment was inevitable. On the bright side, 43 North's mission of supporting young businesses is simply entering a new phase. Anyone who has attended a 43 North final show at Shea's Performing Arts Center can attest that the dynamism is palpable. It's fitting that these events are held at Shea's, where they draw thousands of spectators, and they are just as theatrical and carefully orchestrated as many a Broadway show. Ever since 2014, groups of finalists have delivered pitches for startups ranging from the health tech to inventory management to gluten-free crackers on Shea's stage, with the evening event ending in a raucous celebration as the winners are announced. And now that celebratory business theater is coming to an end. It will be missed, but if all goes as planned, the 43 North Foundation will continue to support startups in Buffalo, just in a different way. As reported by the News' Michael Petro, the accelerator will become more of an incubator, nurturing homegrown businesses rather than attracting companies from around the world to compete for startup funds and support. The reason that's possible? Thanks largely to the success of the companies nurtured by the 43 North competition and the 43 North Foundation, which gets a 5% ownership stake in each winner of a $1 million prize, has the equity to reinvest in the local startup community. Not all of those ownership stakes brought in the same revenue. It's largely thanks to Buffalo's first billion-dollar unicorn company, ACV Auctions, which won the competition in 2015, that the 43 North Foundation is on such solid financial footing. If the foundation is successful in making a pivot from competition mode to supportive mode, it will continue to be just as essential to Buffalo's startup ecosphere as the original accelerator was, maybe even more important. That Buffalo startup ecosphere has expanded from barely apparent to a lively entrepreneurial scene, in largely thanks to 43 North's example. It must also be noted that all of the Buffalo billion investments made by New York State under former Governor Andrew Cuomo, 43 North has been a standout in terms of sustained success and lasting impact. The state's investment was a relatively modest at $5 million. Over the past 12 years, 43 North has invested $55 million in 79 startups that have created 3,000 jobs globally, including 1,000 in Western New York, and raised $1 billion in follow-on capital. About 70% of active companies maintain a presence in Buffalo, but there have also been plenty that have left after a year, the minimum time winning companies are asked to stay, and create economic impact elsewhere or never reached expectations. Considering the odds, very few 43 North companies have actually failed, with 75% still in business. In addition to ACV Auctions, one of the more inspirational 43 North success stories is Top Seeds, which is sold in stores across the country and is employing 90 people in a manufacturing facility on Oak Street. There's also Food Nerd, which creates nutrient-rich plant-based food as an alternative to ultra-processed food for toddlers. The company recently invested in a 30,000 square foot warehouse at 11342 Main Street in Clarence, which has the capacity to produce more than 100,000 product packs per week. At the end of the day, a long-lasting success story is the important goal, and 43 North has never lost sight of that, offering continued support as well as cash to its winners. As George Shamon, CEO of ACV, stated, "When ACV came through the competition, 43 North provided far more than capital. It gave us credibility, and access to a community that believed high-growth technology companies could be built right here in Western New York. Will ambitious CEOs of young companies continue to say that about the efforts of 43 North Foundation when the competitions are over? That's the question, and the prognosis looks good for a positive answer. My View, Farewell to a Faithful Longtime Companion by Lori Duval Jackson. I started to see the signs of aging a couple of years ago. Tasks that once took no time at all were taking much longer. Winter weather, which never used to bother either one of us, suddenly made a difference in our daily routines. I'd known for a while the end was coming and hated to admit that all the care and attention I lavished on my stalwart companion of almost 18 years was no longer helping. I began to fear waking up one morning to find the end had arrived. Finally, reluctantly, I turned to my husband and acknowledged the inevitable. "It's time to ditch the Kia," I said sorrowfully. "I'm going to need a new car." When I bought my SUV all those years ago, my situation was very different. I was single, I had just started a new job, and I was driving my late mother's car. I had little to spend on a vehicle, and I needed one desperately. I knew next to nothing about cars and didn't trust myself to bargain with a salesman in a fashion that befitted me. I figured out what I could afford, and it wasn't what I hoped. I knew I needed help and that it was time to enlist the aid of my secret weapon. I called my brother. Larry has been buying cars since before he could legally drive. For that reason, he had to park his first car in his friend's driveway down the street. I remember he was excited because it has a Hurst shifter. I wouldn't have known what that was, except that on my first ride in the car it came loose and fell through a hole in the floorboards. I had to hop out and pick it up from the street. His judgment has improved tremendously since our teenage years, and he bought more cars in a decade than I have in my entire life. It was almost a hobby, and he was adept at getting bargain prices. When I explained my situation, Larry immediately and enthusiastically jumped on board. After some research into various makes and models, he recommended a new player in the auto market, a manufacturer whose cars were reasonably priced and came with substantial coverage guarantees. I chose an SUV model that suited my needs and visited a dealership recommended by other family. It was the time of year when new models were being introduced and the previous year's inventory was discounted. After some bartering, I was offered the price I wanted. However, the price mysteriously increased when I returned to sign the paperwork. There were pressure tactics such as insistence I would find a better price due to low inventory and that I misunderstood our previous agreement. I stepped outside and called my brother. "What should I do?" I asked. "I really wanted this SUV." Larry didn't hesitate. "Walk out," he ordered. "They are taking advantage. Call another dealer." I went back inside, told the salesman the deal was off, and headed for the door. He actually followed me, insisting I was making a big mistake. I kept going. I found another dealership and got the price I wanted. That SUV lasted 18 years with minimal costs for upkeep. It was a great car. Now I've taken custody of my husband's fairly new SUV, which resembles an airplane cockpit when I start up. I need a tutorial on what everything is, but if it's as good as its predecessor, I'll never need another. Buffalo Next. Spotlight Real Estate. AC is common across Western New York, but not as common as the rest of the U.S. Air conditioning has become a pretty common perk for households in the Buffalo-Niagara region. More than 86% of the households in the region have some form of air conditioning, be it a wall unit or central air, according to a new estimate from the U.S. Census Bureau based on data from 2023. For a region where temperature rarely topped the 90-degree mark, that's pretty high coverage rate, but it is still below the 93% of homes that have air conditioning nationwide, or even the 90% mark statewide. The census data also shows that there are significant discrepancies in the availability of air conditioning between the Buffalo-Niagara metro area and the rural counties in western New York. While Erie County has the highest percentage of homes with air conditioning at 87%, the Niagara County ranks third at 82%. Most of the rural counties have far lower levels of air-conditioned homes and apartments. Air conditioning is hardest to find in Allegheny County, where just 68% of the households have it. Wyoming and Cattaraugus counties have the next lowest rates at 73%, and nearly 78% of the households in Chautauqua County have air conditioning, the Census Bureau says. Not surprisingly, more than 99% of the households in Florida, Georgia, Missouri, Texas, and Nebraska are air conditioned. Just 56% of the households in Hawaii have air conditioning. The only other states where air conditioning rates are less than 73% are Alaska, Montana, and Vermont. M&T's Tech Hub makes an impact. Mike Whistler has seen the effect that M&T Bank's Tech Hub at Seneca One Tower has had on the bank's employee recruiting efforts. I think, maybe not surprisingly, when they walk in here, there's a huge positive kind of confirmation that these guys get it, said Whistler, M&T's Chief Technology and Operations Officer. It looks familiar, whereas before I was selling a dream with maybe not all of the tangible signals that were coming out. So that's helped tremendously. M&T unveiled its Tech Hub 5 years ago, the culmination of a $58 million investment. The sleek offices are an innovation beehive for the bank, but the Tech Hub is about more than just bolstering M&T Bank's own operations. The investment was designed to catalyst the region's undersized tech sector by training more workers and encouraging other innovation-minded companies to move into Seneca One. It is a dramatic turnaround from a decade ago when Buffalo's tallest building was devoid of tenants, but full of doubt. Key tenants, HSBC Bank and Phillips Lytle, had moved out of the 38-story tower. Some thought demolition might be the building's destiny. Instead, developer Doug Jamal bought the tower and revitalized it, with M&T as the anchor. The bank leased 11 floors inside the tower itself, plus 2 floors in the pedestal. M&T still faced a different type of challenge. As the pandemic receded, employers debated how much office space they needed and whether remote work was here to stay. But M&T didn't waver from its vision of making its tech hub a magnet for collaboration. Whistler is a proponent of in-work person. He sees breakthroughs that arise when employees from different departments work together in ways that are difficult to achieve working apart from each other. One example, software developers teaming up with call center agents in the Customer Contact Immersion Center. They've been able to increase the speed by which they can make changes, respond to problems by 300%, and it's because the users are right beside the software developers, and the software developers get a much greater appreciation for the users, Whistler said. The users get a much better appreciation for the software developers. Another sign of the Tech Hub's impact, explosive growth in M&T's releases. That is a term for updates and improvements to the bank's technology, such as new features, product enhancements, software upgrades, and security updates. The bank processed 65,000 releases last year, compared to just 15,000 in 2018. Inside the Tech Hub, which looks suitable for Silicon Valley, teams of employees work on the digital assets that are the underpinning of transactions. Other employees support the customer phone call M&T receives, providing real-time feedback for agents. The staff of a 24/7 command center watches for trouble spots. We're constantly defending the customers in the bank from threats of the world, Whistler said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints and Buffalo Next section of Buffalo News on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Tech investment. The Tech Hub symbolizes the extensive investment in technology M&T has made under Chairman and CEO Renee Jones, as well as Whistler, who joined the bank in 2018. That commitment to tech persuaded executives such as Brady Green to move here. Green was working for LPL Financial in Charlotte, North Carolina, when he joined M&T a few months after Whistler. The two of them had previously worked together at Capital One. Whistler told him M&T was pumping up its tech spending. It's a pretty great opportunity coming in when you know you're going to be on a growth trajectory rather than a slimmed-down trajectory, said Green, who was promoted to Chief Technology Officer last year. Another high-level M&T recruit is Linda Ty, who relocated to Buffalo in 2024 to serve as Chief Information Officer. She had been Chief Technology Officer for Fannie Mae in Washington, D.C. Before that, she had high-level roles with Bank of America and Goldman Sachs in New York City. More than 400 technologists have moved to Buffalo to work for the bank. M&T a few years ago made a strategic decision to move away from relying heavily on contractors for tech work to expanding its own workforce for those responsibilities. Today, about 80% of its tech workforce is in-house. With contractors, they're exiting every 12 to 18 months, Green said. Whatever they learn on the job was really kind of walks out the door. The ability to hire people and retain people is a tremendous benefit to the company. Jones said development of the Tech Hub was part of a mindset shift that M&T made. The reality was, we needed to really change our thinking and the way we thought about technology's role in making M&T be really competitive, he said. And part of the parcel of that is changing our behavior patterns, which is a physical presence does. M&T asks its employees to come together in one place to solve problems. It's made us better and faster and more resilient, able to tackle problems quicker, Jones said. But it's allowed us to be an attractive alternative to the Googles and those other places for people who want to work in this kind of environment. Since 2017, M&T has tripled the amount it spends annually on technology. Last year, that figure exceeded $1.2 billion. Jones said about 30% of M&T's tech spending is on people. Driving force. Locally, M&T has spent $73 million on its tech hub at Seneca One, as well as a companion location down Main Street at Lafayette Court. Across M&T, the bank has about 2,000 technologists. The vast majority of them work out of these two Buffalo locations. The Tech Hub at Seneca One has about 1,700 seats for employees. The number of employees who work there day-to-day fluctuates, with technologists, designers, product owners, and business experts using the space. When M&T revealed plans for the Tech Hub 7 years ago, the idea was to attract talent not only for M&T, but for other companies and tech and entrepreneurial organizations that wanted to co-locate in and around the hub. Part of the reason that we didn't take all the space at Seneca One was to create enough density to create some attractiveness, but leave some room for other tenants, Whistler said. M&T's Tech Academy is there, as is Tech Buffalo, the nonprofit that promotes development of the tech ecosystem. 43 North is a Seneca One tenant, helping startups spread their wings. 43 North is winding down its operations at the end of 2027. Lighthouse Technology and Odoo, a business software company, were tenants but have since moved out. Back in 2020, Lighthouse was one of the first companies to move into the rejuvenated Seneca One. By the time Lighthouse's lease came up for extension 5 years later, the commercial real estate market had changed significantly. The company evaluated its options and chose the Larkin at Exchange building as its new home. The Zemke family in the Larkinville neighborhood aligned so well with our values and the environment we wanted to provide for our team members right now, said Joe Ray, a spokesman for Lighthouse. In both 2020 and today, we feel fortunate to have landed where we have. As for Odoo's move to Fountain Plaza, Whistler is philosophical about it. One of the things that I'm hopeful of that continues to happen is the entire corridor becomes more dense, Whistler said. I think that we will achieve the full potential of the clustering and the race for relevance when, from Canal Side all the way up to the medical campus, it's just more dense. Live, eat, work, play, collaborate, educate together. Whistler noted Ingram Micro has moved downtown from the suburbs, and Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield is relocated into Seneca One. It doesn't have to be software developers, just modern companies that are continuing to try to innovate, he said. Those are really great tailwinds. Ripple effect. Jeffrey Boderon, president and CEO of Tech Buffalo, said M&T is a reliable partner for tech initiatives. The bank supports events such as Women in Tech at Seneca One and hosts more intimate gatherings such as a meeting of technology executives from different companies coming together to create a vision for what the talent blueprint for Buffalo should look like, he said. Boderon said the region's tech sector continues to punch above its weight in the form of innovations by stalwarts such as M&T or by startups such as Guidesley and Azuna. I think so much of the inspiration that allows those things to happen is really rooted in the fact that we have this asset, this tech hub right downtown, he said. We see it. When we bring people through the tech hub, they stand a little taller. They believe a little bit more in Buffalo, and they leave a little bit more inspired, and I think it's a big deal to have that here in our city. To Boderon, that speaks to a vision that M&T followed through on. I think what M&T recognized in placing a tech hub in Buffalo was that for the U.S. to be successful, these spaces must exist outside of these traditional tech hubs, he said. There has to be opportunity for innovation. There has to be opportunity to grow a great career in tech outside of a coastal city. And I think that's what's going on in the M&T Tech Hub. It's doing right here in Buffalo. It's giving thousands of people the opportunity, both through direct employment with M&T, but also the catalytic effect that it has on the community to grow their career. It's a really big blessing to have them here. That concept extends to young people, Boderon said. Tech Buffalo brings interns from its Power Up Tech summer program through the Tech Hub to help them picture making tech careers in Buffalo. Whistler said he wants to build on what M&T has achieved with the Tech Hub over 5 years. It's not just a mere fact of counting how many dollars you're spending in tech, but how are you changing the outcomes of the company, he said. A place like this, the density of this and the kind of momentum that it has in taking its place as a relevant part of the bank just needs to continue. We're doing a lot of innovation around the whole of the footprint, and a lot of it traces back to the work that we're doing right here, Whistler said. Discount Dilemma by Rachel Spears, KFF Health News. When you go to the pharmacy, you might be offered a coupon on your prescription drugs. While it may sound like a great deal, the decision to accept it is complicated. Even as prescription drug costs rise, patients with commercial insurance slowed their use of manufacturer-sponsored drug coupons in recent years, according to a study the Journal of the American Medical Association published in April 6th. These are not the same as discount card services from companies like GoodRx, which negotiate lower bulk pricing for prescription drugs, then pass those savings along to consumers. Drug manufacturers distribute copay coupon cards to consumers to keep their drugs competitive by offering patients short-term savings. Consumers pay less out of pocket, often for brand name drugs. This encourages patients to use the brand name version even when a cheaper generic version might be available. Some insurers say this unfairly puts them on the hook for pricier drugs. They say minimum premiums, monthly premiums, are higher as a result, punishing consumers and patients. Should you use manufacturer-sponsored drug coupons? It depends. What if you don't have insurance? If you're uninsured, using a coupon can be a great way to save money, especially if there is no generic version of the drug. Trump RX is a new federally funded initiative that acts as a prescription drug coupon dashboard for patients. Some of the coupons come from the manufacturers, while others do not. Not every drug has a coupon offer. Michelle Long, a senior policy manager at KFF who studies patient and consumer protections, said people without insurance can save money by using Trump RX or manufacturer coupons. Still, she says, Trump RX lists only about 85 drugs. It is important to note drug coupons have limitations and guidelines, and they don't last forever. What if you have insurance? If the drug isn't covered by your commercial health insurance plan or you intend to pay cash, the coupon may be the way to go. Insurance coverage varies for certain kinds of drugs, such as GLP-1 obesity drugs. The study found coupons used by commercial insurance holders on obesity drugs dropped from 54.6% of prescriptions in 2017 to only 2.5% in 2024, though use of the drugs rose. So-Young Kang, the study's main author, who is an assistant professor of health management and policy at Georgetown University, said this reflects the growing number of patients paying cash for the drugs as prices decline, along with the insurers' reluctance to cover them and manufacturers shifting focus from coupon distribution to marketing campaigns. What if you expect high medical costs? If you have insurance and anticipate meeting your deductible for the year, consider using a coupon. However, your insurer likely won't count the value of the coupon toward your deductible. Only use a coupon if there is no generic option available and you know you'd otherwise hit your deductible. What if you have a plan but low costs? The answer is almost always don't use the coupon. If the drug is covered by your insurance, using coupons will put you at risk for higher indirect costs. It's also often more advantageous to spend toward your deductible. Watch out for copay adjustment programs that insurers use to discourage the use of coupons. They come in two common forms, Long said. Copay accumulators allow the use of drug coupons up to their full value, but the amount of the coupon won't count towards the patient's deductible or out-of-pocket maximums, making it harder to reach the threshold at which insurers will pitch in on prescriptions and other medical care. It can also mean a patients eventually pay the full cost of the drug because they haven't yet met their annual deductible. Copay maximizers, which also prevent the coupon value from counting towards deductibles, use a third party to adjust patients' copayments over the course of the year to match the amount of the manufacturer's coupons. What if you're on Medicaid or Medicare? Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries are prohibited from using manufacturer-sponsored coupons. A federal anti-kickback law makes it illegal to give someone anything of value to influence their decision to purchase something that will ultimately be paid for by a federal health care program. The law also prevents remuneration, which includes waiving copays and charging less than fair market value for a product. Some states, notably California and Massachusetts, prohibit or limit the use of manufacturer drug coupons when a generic version of the drug is available. Grape Co-op wants to turn dealership into a juice factory, by Jonathan D. Epstein. A Chautauqua County grape growers cooperative is hoping to juice up a future business opportunity for its member owners by acquiring a former car dealership in Westfield and converting it into a factory that will produce drink pouches filled with locally made Concord grape juice. WMC Grape Juice, a subsidiary of Westfield Made Cooperative, acquired the 8,472 square foot former DeHaven's Dodge City dealership building at 7505 East Route 20 in Westfield, where it plans to install a processing and packaging line for its 4-ounce good and grapey juice pouches that are its market for wholesale distribution. Developed with help from Cornell Agritech, the stand-up single-serve pouches are filled with 100% grape juice from New York State and peel open at the neck with no straw, making them more kid-friendly and spill-resistant, as noted by testers. An earlier version won first place for Best New Concord Beverage in the New York Concord Grape Initiative competition hosted by Cornell in 2022, with a $20,000 prize being used for startup expenses. The most important agricultural product in Westfield's history continues to be the Concord grape, with grape and juice processing and winemaking as significant economic drivers for the agricultural industry and related employment, Town Supervisor Martha Bills said. She added, Westfield made Co-op's new WMC grape juice fruit pouch facility is a welcome addition. Founded in 1935 as a fruit and vegetable processing group called the Westfield Planters Cooperative Fruit Products, Inc., Westfield Made adopted its current name in 1946 and refocused solely on Concord grapes. The for-profit cooperative now consists of 75 family-owned farms in New York and Pennsylvania that produce more than 8,000 tons of Concord grapes each year across 1,450 acres of farmland. It formed WMC Grape Juice in 2019 to diversify its business and marketing opportunities, and has been working with local officials on the startup project for several years. It began by distributing single-serve juice cup containers that were sold to schools until the COVID-19 pandemic, and then later developed the new shelf-stable pouch product it is now marketing. 1 ton of grapes can produce 5,800 juice pouches. But growers across the region were dealt a heavy blow March 17th when Refresco Beverages, a global juice and soft drink company with an operation in Dunkirk, suddenly canceled contracts with grape farmers across the Lake Erie region, displacing 126 growers with 2,600 acres. So this project has become really important for us and the grape growers by giving them an alternative, Westfield Made Cooperative President Bob Patterson said. We believe this product will secure our grower members' farms' futures by reducing current dependency on a single customer in a single market, while also positioning us for profitable sales growth in diversified niche markets for Concord grape juice, Patterson said, noting that the new venture would cover more than half of the grape juice that the cooperative produces. A food bank in Pennsylvania is also interested in a $600,000 order. We have a very conservative marketing plan, and even if that pans out, it will be successful, Patterson added. To support the $2.6 million investment, the Chautauqua County Industrial Development Agency approved a pair of $100,000 working capital loans from 2 different funds, both at 4% for 5 years, backed by various liens and corporate guarantees. Other startup help includes a $1.58 million loan from Farm Credit East with an 80% guarantee from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as funding from New York Small Business Development Center at Jamestown Community College, Empire State Development Corp., and money authorized through the county executive and state lawmakers. The operation will initially be staffed by member owners, but officials expect to create 4 jobs in the second year and 17 by the 6th year as the business expands. The packaging equipment, which takes 9 months to engineer, has already been ordered, and Patterson says he hopes to be ready to go by November 1st. Lower job targets for Americold. The CCIDA also agreed to modify the employment terms of a 2021 property tax initiative for Americold Real Estate, which built a 175,000-foot cold storage distribution facility in the town of Dunkirk. Instead of requiring 60 new jobs, CCIDA agreed to reduce that to 40 by the end of 2028. No additional financial assistance was requested. Americold invested more than $37 million to build the facility on 28 acres at 4053 William Street, primarily for use by ice cream maker Wells Enterprises, which had planned a major expansion for its Blue Bunny business. However, Wells' expansion, while significant, took much longer than expected, so the anticipated growth in the storage and use did not materialize. The facility is only 58% occupied, and fewer jobs were needed for Americold for now. 55 schools compete in tech wars. SUNY Erie Community College hosted more than 900 middle and high school students and educators from across Western New York for the annual Tech Wars competition in May at its downtown campus. Hosted in partnership with the Western New York Technology Education Association, Tech Wars is a long-standing regional STEM competition designed to inspire student interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics through hands-on, team-based challenges. Students from 55 schools throughout the region competed in a variety of engineering, design, and technology-focused events, including bridge design, cardboard boat races, mousetrap-powered cars, robot air races, Rube Goldberg devices, and T-shirt logo design competitions. Launch New York invests in Ognami post-process. Buffalo startups Ognami and post-process received $130,000 worth of investment from Launch New York earlier this year. Launch New York, which combines capital, programming, and strategic connections to help founders move from early traction to scalable growth, deployed $1.3 million across 7 upstate New York startups during the first quarter of the year. Post-process nailed down an $80,000 investment, while Ognami received $50,000. Ognami is expanding access to high-quality diagnosis and longitudinal care for patients with sleep apnea, delivering specialist-led treatment through scalable virtual platform, while Post-Process delivers software-driven, full-stack solutions for scalable, sustainable 3D printing production. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, June 7, 2026 issue of the Viewpoints section and Buffalo Next of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News every Sunday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been Jean. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. Stay tuned for these readings and more. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please stay with us. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Zero, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability